Well, greetings. I'm very pleased to have you join us for today's workshop, Your Agency in 30 Seconds. Just a few logistics before we begin. You should see on your screen the title slide of the presentation. If you're having difficulty or get disconnected for any reason, just go back to the recent email you received from us and click through to join the session again. Also, I'm sure you're used to this. All microphones should be muted on your end to reduce any background noise. Today's session will last a total of 75 minutes. There will be 60 minutes of presentation, and then we'll allow 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. So we'll stop then and address any questions you might have. I would encourage you to type any questions into the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. So all questions will need to be submitted in writing. And you can submit your questions anytime during the webinar. If something pops into your head that you'd like to get an answer to, then just go ahead and type it in, but we'll wait towards the end to stop and have that discussion. So I will be turning my camera off now so you can have a full view of the workshop content. And let's get started. The central question for today is, what is your elevator pitch? What can you say in a single sentence that describes your firm as though you were talking to a prospective client? So the idea here is you're on the 30th floor of an office building, you have a prospective client walk in the elevator. Of course, these are unusual times. We'd have to be appropriately social distanced. But this prospect says, "Oh, Jones and Smith, I've heard of you guys. Tell me about your agency." And are you prepared with an interesting, compelling, memorable, differentiating answer to that question? That's what today's session is about. Let's look at some examples. You tell me what you think of these. Let's say your answer is, well, we take brands from where they are to where they ought to be. These are actual examples of so-called elevator pitches, or at least short answers to agency descriptions from real agencies. Here's another. We're an end-to-end marketing and communications company that looks at everything from your perspective. So I want you to be thinking, are these memorable? Are they differentiating? Do they really say what's unique and valuable about our firm? Here's another example. We help brands thrive in harsh environments by creating meaningful work that makes a huge impact. So, there's some interesting energy to that last one, but I think you'd agree with me that none of the three of these really qualify as something that would allow a prospect to get out of that elevator thinking, wow, this is exactly the right agency, the kind of agency I've been looking for. One of the most comprehensive studies of business success ever published, it's published in the Harvard Business Review, did an analysis and concluded that many factors are important in the success of a business, but only one has a direct causal relationship to superior business performance. And I'll bet you can guess what it is. A clearly stated, focused positioning strategy. That one thing, more than anything else, will determine your current and future success as a business. So it's a pretty essential question. And we need to stop and think what qualifies as an effective positioning strategy. What is good strategy? And conversely, what's bad strategy? Because there are many more examples of bad strategy than there are of good strategy, because strategy making is difficult. It takes a lot of thought and brain power. And we're pretty sloppy for the most part when it comes to strategic planning, because we end up with documents like this, where we articulate our strategy in these 7 points. This is an actual example. We'll be the agency of choice in our region. 2, we'll delight our clients with unique, effective solutions to their problems. 3, we'll grow revenue by at least 15% each year. 4, we'll maintain a profit margin of at least 20%. 5, we'll have a culture of commitment. 6, we'll foster an honest and open work environment. And 7, will support work to support broader community in which we operate. So these are all good and noble statements, aren't they? Certainly desirable, but this is not a strategy, is it? And that's the first mistake that we make in strategic planning, is mistaking goals for strategy. The second and related mistake we make is mistaking a plan for a strategy, a business plan for a strategy. I mean, I've seen many so-called strategic planning documents. Some of them can be like this bound tabbed example I have on the screen that looks pretty impressive, passes the thud test when you lay it on a desk. But it's simply an articulation of goals and objectives and plans. It's not a strategy. So what's the difference? What's the difference? Well, a business plan really outlines the steps that we intend to take. All the things that we want to make sure we include and that we address in the coming year. It normally is a forecast of our revenues and expenses. And a business plan isn't an important thing to have, but it comes out of your business strategy, which is a separate kind of document and exercise, because strategy is not about taking steps and making plans. It's about making choices. It's about not what to include, but what to leave out. It's not about forecasting your revenues and expenses. It's about forecasting what we think the future looks like. What will the business environment look like next year and the year after that? And so therefore, how should we be prepared to address and optimize and maximize what's going to be happening in the business environment? So business strategy is infernally difficult because you have to decide the things that you're going to not focus on, not do, not include. And that's difficult because it's human nature, isn't it, for us to want to just be ambitious and have a long list of things that we want to do in the coming year. I'd like to share with you a couple of definitions that I really like, that I think are useful about strategy. And one is from the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, A.G. Lafley, who says strategy is a set of choices. There's that choice word again, about how to win. And he writes about this pretty persuasively in his book, Playing to Win, which is definitely worth a read. A set of choices. So not just what to do, but what not to do. And P&G is an example of a company that understands this. You may recall a headline several years ago in the trade press that announced P&G plans to basically get rid of about half of its brands. So of its 150 brands, some of which are real household names and iconic names in the marketing business, they decided that they're going to divest or merge or sell or just shut down half of those brands, because they determined that of the 150, only 75 were producing 80% of their revenue and close to 90% of their profit. So that's what strategy is. And I often like to think how willing we in professional services would be to look at our list of service offerings and say, you know what, we're going to discontinue half of those. I actually think in many cases that would be a very good idea, but it's difficult, isn't it? That would be a difficult decision to make. So part of my job in our time together today is to persuade you that that's actually a worthwhile thing to look at and to consider. One of my favorite definitions of strategy comes from Michael Porter of Harvard Business School, maybe the father of modern business strategy. He says the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. As I said, choosing what to do is pretty easy. You get a room of senior executives together and you get a whiteboard and you start brainstorming, okay, what do we want to do in the coming year and the next 5 years, and you can generate a very long list, right? You can fill up several pages on a flip chart and paper that around the room. But then if you guide the discussion to the question, okay, what should we stop doing? What should we not do? That's more difficult because it involves trade-offs, which is another one of the essential elements of business strategy. So what does qualify as a positioning strategy, particularly in the agency world? Let's look at some things that strategy is not. At the very top of my list, far and away, full service is not a strategy. In fact, there's no such thing as full service. There isn't a company in any category that can actually fulfill every need, but that doesn't stop tens of thousands of professional firms from claiming it. It's a meaningless term if there ever was one. What's like the opposite of full service? Partial service or half service? It just doesn't mean anything. It's a claim you can never back up, and it's meaningless. So it's a waste of space on your website. It's a waste of time to include it in your elevator pitch, and it's certainly not differentiating. Its close cousin is claiming to have a wide range of services or serving a wide range of clients. No client worth having ever buys a wide range of expertise. What do they want? They want a specific kind of expertise. They want expertise in their business, in their category. It actually, and this is quite counterintuitive, it actually can be a turnoff to many prospects. When you claim too much experience in too many categories, they look at you, maybe an agency of, especially if you're an agency of 40 or 50 people or fewer, they look at that big list and they say, how could they possibly be that good in all of these things? It just lacks credibility. And so as a business strategy, new business strategy, wide range takes us actually in the wrong direction. A wide net catches only small fish. The big fish are looking for experience in their category. Lots of surveys done by client organizations show that is the number one factor in making a decision about hiring an agency partner is, do they know my business? Do they have experience in my industry, in my category, in my segment? So that's really the only thing that a serious prospect cares about. Similarly, integrated, not a strategy. And by the way, these three examples I'm showing you, full service, wide range, and integrated, are almost always stated together in the same sentence, as in, we are a full service agency offering integrated services to a wide range of clients. Does that sound familiar? And when we're caught off guard and unprepared to deliver a memorable elevator pitch, that's unfortunately what we default to. I've unfortunately done that several times in my past life and then kicked myself like, wow, that was a really bad answer. Because as we've said, it's not differentiating. It's what everybody else says. So what is, if that's what positioning is not, let's look at some ways to think about what positioning is. And based on the quote that I just shared with you, top of the list for me, it's first and foremost deciding what not to do. Now this chart that I have on the screen is a really good example of that. So this is retail customer purchase criteria that you can see listed down the left-hand side: low prices, selection across categories, rural convenience, reliable prices, etc. Then you see on it's charting on the red line is Walmart, and then we've got Sears, which is much less of a factor now, mom and pop stores. Walmart They score an excellent on low prices. They're very good on selection across categories, good on rural convenience, pretty good on reliable prices, of course. Not so great on in-stock merchandise and merchandise quality, not good on suburban convenience, selection within categories, sales help. No, have you ever tried to get sales help at a Walmart? And ambiance, not Walmart stores not known for their ambiance. So is this by default or by design that Walmart chooses to be excellent in some things and poor in others? And what would this line look like if we were instead charting Nordstrom? It would look maybe the opposite, wouldn't it? And again, that's not by default, that's by design. That's Walmart and Nordstrom making deliberate choices that we're going to be excellent in these things. We know that we're only going to be average in these things and we'll actually be poor on these other things because that's not our strategy. You can't be good at everything. What if Walmart decided they were going to try and score excellent in all of these things? It would be impossible, wouldn't it? You can't have lots of good qualified sales help and a great looking store and all of that and still have their incredible low prices. It just doesn't work. Those things are mutually exclusive. This is also true in professional services. We desperately want to try and be excellent in everything. It's just an impossibility. Another way to look at positioning, curating. I love this quote from Seth Godin: what makes a great museum is the stuff that's not on the walls. So a curator in a museum is deciding only this is going to go up and not this, so that the exhibit is curated with the things that they know complement the theme that they're trying to present to the museum goers. And the same is true for us. What makes a great agency are the clients you don't have, the services you don't offer, because that is a demonstration of the fact that you have thought critically about what you're really good at instead of being average in everything, in a lot of things. Positioning can be thought of as a way to repeat success. If you have a well-defined positioning strategy, then the successes build one upon the other. You know that when you approach a client where you have great experience, that you'll be successful, that you'll be able to produce results for them, versus a client or a service that you've never done before and you kind of scramble your way through, which is one of the things that a lot of agencies do, right? We're asked by a client, hey, do you guys do experiential events? And we say, yeah, sure, we do that. And then we go back to the office and say, guys, can we do an experiential event? Because you've never done one before, but you desperately want to say yes, and we somehow have the illusion that that's going to make for a good client relationship, and it usually is the opposite, isn't it? We disappoint our clients because we don't know what we're doing. The example I have on the screen, Ray Ward, I'm going to come back to as one of my positioning success story examples. Positioning is about offering fewer features, not more. So this example's been used a lot, but when you pull up a Google search, what do you see? You see a completely blank screen. The entire screen is blank except for the Google logo and the search bar. That screen is the most valuable piece of online real estate on the planet. Why doesn't Google plaster it with ads and links and other things? They could make a lot of money if they did that. Why don't they? Because they understand that less is more, and that by offering up just a simple way to perform your search, that then they can then deliver to you where they really extract their value. But that's a kind of restraint that's difficult for us. Most other kinds of companies would tend to want to get their money's worth out of that blank screen. Another great example is Apple. You'll notice, and a lot of you Apple users, most new Apple hardware actually has fewer features, fewer buttons, fewer ports, right? They're constantly subtracting. Underneath the hood is a very powerful, very useful, very valuable set of technologies. But what Apple's trying to do is simplify their products for their users. If you look at an Apple mouse today, there are no buttons on it. The Apple iOS devices, there's no home button anymore. So this is exactly what we want to be doing with our service offerings: is look for ways that we can streamline what we do, but knowing that under the hood, as I say, is a powerful set of services and solutions for our clients. And I'm going to share with you a way you can think about that and the way you can package that up. I think another really useful way to think about positioning, I mentioned it briefly, is that it's about trade-offs. It's about making trade-offs. We can do this, but we can't do that. And I've got a whole collection of photos just like this one. Royal Buffet, steaks, barbecue, sushi, bakery. They do great American and great Italian and great Asian. Would you trust the Royal Buffet to deliver world-class sushi, for example? I don't think so. Most of us would be looking for just Italian or just Asian, knowing we're going to have a much better experience that way. And this is true in professional services. So I'd like to invite you now, if you have a piece of paper and a pen handy, I want to ask you a series of 10 questions. And I'd like you to give each of these questions a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 indicates strongly disagree, 10 strongly agree, and answer it for your firm in general. So here we go. First question. We have a unique and differentiating answer to the question, what business are we in? Give that a rating scale of 1 to 10. 2, we have effectively identified the areas in which our firm is best in class. Best in class, meaning these services that we offer in a world-class way. There are very few agencies that can do this as well as we do. So you've got to be very honest and critical in your answer. 3, we have a clear definition of the clients that best fit our positioning strategy. Not just clients with money or clients that we like or clients with whom we have good chemistry, but clients that fit our positioning strategy. 4, we target a specific segment of the market, not the entire market. In other words, we don't consider everybody a prospect. We have, as in question 3, criteria that we look for. 5, we try to focus on what we do best instead of attempting to offer every possible service. 6, we avoid the promises of full service, complete, or wide range, or integrated, like we talked about before. 7, we are as concerned with making our firm different as we are with making it better. In other words, we invest just as much time in deciding how we can be unique, not just good. 8, we actively avoid working in areas that don't represent the core of our business. In other words, we're willing to say no politely to prospects who don't fit our strategy. 9, we believe in the strategic advantages of narrow and deep over broad and shallow. And that's part of my mission today, is to convince you that narrow and deep is a much more productive, successful, profitable business strategy than broad and shallow. And finally, and maybe most importantly, we avoid imitating the business models of our competitors. It's so easy to copy, isn't it? And it runs deep in human nature. We look at what other agencies, in fact, it's the first thing we do. What are other agencies doing? What are they saying? What services are they offering? I'm not saying we shouldn't know that. I'm just saying it shouldn't be the basis of our strategy. In fact, our decision ought to be, let's look at what other agencies are doing, and let's not do that. Let's don't copy it. Let's not do that. Let's do something different. And so this is difficult work, isn't it? And it takes a lot of discipline. because to arrive at an effective positioning strategy, you've got to interrogate your firm until it confesses its strengths. In other words, you have to put your own brand in that chair, turn on the bright lights, and just keep asking over and over, what makes us, in which areas can we be best in class? It's a tough question. In which categories can we have such deep expertise that very few agencies can match it? Tough questions, and you got to keep coming at it and keep coming at it. But I'd like to share with you a framework for how to do that. And it involves a set of boundaries. We resist the idea of boundaries. We don't want to be quote unquote boxed in, but I would like to submit that if we don't have a box, we don't have a strategy. If we don't have any boundaries, we don't have a business strategy, because short of absent any boundaries and any definition, then we're trapped in that race to the bottom of promising everything to everybody. So I'd like to propose that there are 4 boundaries that will help us define our strategy. And the first I call what. And this is a definition of our competencies, essentially the problems we solve for our clients. What are the types of problems we solve for our clients? What are the types of solutions that we're very good at, consistently good at? The second question is who. Second boundary is who. This is a definition of the markets we serve, our customers, our clients. We can't serve every market effectively, but we can serve some, and which are those markets? The third boundary we call way, and that is the approach we take, our methodologies, our philosophies, our processes. And then the fourth is maybe the most difficult of all 4, and that's answering the question of why, our calling. What's our purpose? Why are we in business in the first place? That runs very deep in our corporate DNA. But we've got to have good, solid, differentiating answers to all 4 of these areas to have an effective positioning strategy. So I'd like to take each one of them one at a time, give you several examples. Let's start with what. So again, what is answering the question, what is our solution set, our services, our competencies? What are the types of problems we solve for our clients? As I've said repeatedly now, we can be good at something, but we can't be good at everything. I'm sure most of you have seen the LUMAscape, the really incredibly complex ecosystem of marketing services and marketing solutions that agencies can deliver to their clients. And there are lots of versions of this. But the question is, are you really going to try to be best in class in all of this? Is that possible? I mean, even if you're an agency of 1,000 people, or could you really be best in class in all of these things? And is that a smart idea? The Harvard marketing professor, Ted Levitt, some years ago taught his students, no one ever buys a 3/4 inch drill. We buy the expectation of a 3/4 inch hole. So that's a useful way to think about what we do, isn't it? We're selling the benefit of our services, not the services themselves. Yet we do a very poor job of this. And I'd like to ask you just to think about, are you selling the drill or the hole? Because if you go to agency websites, you'll see a page that looks like this. It's a services page, and it lists advertising and brand strategy and graphic design and media and social media and digital marketing. Well, what is that? That's just a list of drills. That's not a list of holes. That's not a list of solutions. So it's the first place to start on the question of defining your what is here, which is deciding what are the business problems that we solve for our clients. So this requires getting your team together and thinking about this question. Yeah, we do a lot of things. We've solved a lot of problems over the years, but essentially, what are the types of problems we solve for clients that we seem to do over and over and that we do really well and that feel like they're core to who we really are? And to help you think through that, you think about the question of specific outcomes your clients seek. And then, of course, you can support that then with the services they buy to help us produce these outcomes. So that these things kind of all ladder back to the problems we solve. One of the great examples from the client community is Bausch & Lomb. So this is a company that for many years has been in the business of optics. I mean, that's their product. They make lenses for eyeglasses and telescopes and microscopes and things, but that's a drill, isn't it? We make lenses. What's the whole? Well, Bausch & Lomb is in the sight business. That's a really interesting, powerful insight that we help people see better. What's the equivalent of that for you? So let me show you some examples of positioning strategies that are based on a what, that are centered around a what. So these are agencies who don't purport to do everything. So one great example are experiential agencies. So here's Mosaic. They're in the business of connecting people with brands, as they say, one experience at a time. It's experiential event marketing, etc. They don't claim to be, nor do they want to be, a full service agency. Here's Fitch, essentially design brand identity, but focus mostly on retail, global retail, brand consultancy. So again, that's just brand design. You can choose to be focused just on the media side, and there are lots of examples of media agencies, but there's a new breed of really interesting media agencies, this one Assembly, that do media in a different way. But again, they're not full service. They're not also doing creative work and PR and so forth. Here's a really interesting example. Smaller, mid-sized independent agency, Tribe in Atlanta. We do internal communications. And that's all we do, they say, internal communications. So they work for very notable brands. I've seen their client list include, Porsche and FedEx and Home Depot, big brands. But what they do for these big brands is just internal communications. So they help publicize, evangelize the brand inside the client organizations rather externally to consumers. So pretty interesting business strategy. One of the inspirational examples of this is Walt Disney many years ago, and this is actually probably hand drawn by Walt himself. In the center, you see where Disney started their theatrical films, Snow White and the early animated and theatrical films that they did. Based on that, Walt understood that there was a way to take that core competency and export it to TV, to merchandise and licensing, to publications, books and magazines, to music, but they're all related and they're complementary and they build upon one another, and they all center around this idea of their theatrical films. There are some more modern examples of that. Here's Apple. That has, and we all know this, you buy an Apple product, you're not just buying a Mac or an iPhone or an iPad, you're buying the Apple ecosystem, aren't you? That's the real value that an Apple product delivers is, yeah, it's a great piece of hardware with great features, But what makes it really valuable is it's part of an ecosystem where everything talks to one another. Nike has done something similar by taking, shoes, a running shoe or apparel, and making the shoes talk to running apps and watches and fuel bands and equipment. So you don't just buy a Nike product, you buy the Nike ecosystem. Now, there's an equivalent of this for us in agencies and in professional services. I submit that most of us have not done the work to develop an ecosystem, but I do say we should. So the essential questions regarding your what, first of all, are we clear about the primary way our firm creates value for our clients, the types of problems we solve, the solutions we offer? Can we articulate a small number of these capabilities that we do better than anyone else? And by the way, it doesn't matter how small you are or where you're located. You can be very small in a non-urban area and still be best in class. And third, have we defined a way how these can all work together in an ecosystem? If you got good answers to those three questions, you've got a very distinctive, valuable what. Okay, let's move on now to who. And this is the question of the markets we serve. So we can't be expert at everything. We can't have deep experience in every kind of category, but we can choose certain areas where we can develop that. So let me show you some examples of agencies whose positioning strategy centers around not a what, but a who. So here's Abelson Taylor, Chicago, independent agency, exclusively health and wellness. It's all they do. They wouldn't think to take on a client that is not in their sweet spot of health and wellness, and they're awesome at it. Now, for health and wellness brands, they offer quite a few services. They have a lot of things that they do for health and wellness brands. So they have a fairly broad what, but they have a very well-defined who. Here's MMGY Global Travel and Tourism. Largest integrated travel marketing organization in the world is the claim. In the UK, this is FRF, they just do entertainment brands. They just focus in the entertainment industry, entertainment business, but they're awesome at it. They're awesome. Origin, based out of Canada, outdoor brands, in effect. Mountain biking, outdoor sports, anything related to things you do outdoors. So there are many, many examples of agencies that have chosen to develop deep expertise in a particular business segment. Let's look at way. So this is the question of how we deliver this value to our clients. What are our unique philosophies, approaches, methods? And this is a difficult one to claim as the centerpiece of your positioning strategy. There are a few agencies who can and who do. I'm going to show you some examples. For most agencies, it's a support to your what and who rather than the basis of your strategy. But let me show you a few examples where it is the basis. This is Oliver, and you might know these guys based out of the UK, but they have offices lots of other places. They basically set up an agency inside their client organizations. So they build dedicated agencies inside their clients' worlds, as they say. So that's pretty unique, isn't it? It's pretty different in terms of an operating model and an approach. Here's the world's first global cloud-based agency. So that's interesting that you operate in a completely virtual way. That's a little less differentiating now post-pandemic than it used to be, but at a time it was quite different. Here's Siegel and Gale. They have a simplicity index that they publish and report on, and the idea here is that simple brands are more profitable. The less complex your brand, the better your focus, the better you're going to do in the marketplace. And so they track this, and they help brands simplify themselves. So that's a way kind of positioning strategy. And then TBWA famously disruption, a very strong way. So they're the disruption company. And this isn't just hyperbole. I mean, lots of agencies say they do disruptive work, but this agency has written 4 books on the topic, and they have inside the agency, they have disruption days and disruption training. And I mean, this is a way of life if you work inside TBWA. So there are many ways that you can define and differentiate your way, how you do things, how you solve. Do you have a unique way you do that? How you produce, how you collaborate, how you deliver, how you serve your clients. Do you have a unique client service approach or methodology? How you manage. This can be internally with your own people, and the way you recruit and compensate your talent and motivate and so forth. How you look, of course, how you promote, and how you price. Now that is a big differentiator in and of itself. And as most of you probably know, we do completely different seminars on that topic, pricing as a point of differentiation. So that was a big topic in and of its own, but it's an important piece of your way, how you price. Because if you price differently than other agencies, and if you price in different ways, if you're the only agency that a client's talking to that doesn't bill by the hour, that's pretty differentiating. And it sparks the question from your client, well, why? Why don't you bill by the hour? Why don't you have hourly rates? And that gets you in to a good discussion with your prospects. Let's look at why. So this is really difficult. It's about the purpose that you as an organization are pursuing. Increasing your firm's revenues from 30 to 31 million might be a useful target, but it's not a motivating purpose, is it? It's not a purpose. A purpose is the reason we go to work in the morning. It's beyond making money, beyond earning a paycheck. So getting to your purpose is, as I say, challenging for firms that don't already have one. Here's an independent firm, Crosby, on the East Coast, that is all about a sense of purpose. Their entire agency revolves around this idea of inspiring actions that matter. They only work for brands. And a lot of them, by the way, are government entities like the Veterans Affairs and others, where they're doing things that really matter for the health and welfare and safety of Americans. So that is strongly motivating for the people who work in that agency. Shelton Group, a small independent agency that has a very clearly articulated strategy and purpose. We refuse to accept the apocalyptic future forecast for our planet as a result of unbridled climate change. So every day we dedicate ourselves to creating a market advantage for organizations that dedicate themselves to creating a responsible, sustainable future. So they help companies build sustainability into their business model. That's pretty interesting. And boy, if you find that personally motivating, then you'd be motivated to do a great job for your clients, wouldn't you? Chris Zook, James Allen, in their really excellent book, Repeatability, say the vast majority of best performing companies have explicit, non-negotiable principles that are understood and followed across the organization. These are the lines that we do not cross. So your why can be thought of as your statement of purpose, the reason your firm exists beyond making money, your credo, as we just said, your non-negotiable principles, your rules of engagement. Here are the things that we will always do, and here are the things that we will never do. And when you have a clear, motivating sense of purpose, you've got, by definition, a motivated team. Peter Drucker, the management consultant, said in knowledge work, none of us are employees, we're all volunteers. We could go get another job doing something else. We could all become commercial real estate agents and probably make more money. But we choose to do what we do. We're volunteering for the firm that we work for. And so volunteers are motivated by a sense of purpose, aren't they? They're not motivated by money. We don't volunteer because of money. We volunteer because we feel drawn to that company's why. So very important. Okay, how do we put this all together? These boundaries of what, who, way, and why. Because ultimately what we're trying to do here is have this memorable differentiating answer to, hey, tell me about yourself, our elevator pitch, describing what we do in 30 seconds. So here's how we put this all together. For who, meaning the markets we serve, we solve these kinds of problems in this kind of way by taking this kind of approach because we believe strongly in such and such. You see how that works? For this kind of client, we solve these kinds of problems by applying this methodology because we believe that sustainability is the most important issue of our time, right? As an example. So let me show you a few examples of how agencies have done this. Here is a independent agency in the Toronto area, Corey, and you can just see right here on their website homepage, they put a pretty clear stake in the ground. Experts in demand marketing exclusive to B2B tech. That's right on their homepage. So they're who? B2B technology brands. That's pretty specific, isn't it? It's not just B2B, it's B2B technology. Their what is so for B2B technology brands, we help grow sales by helping them shift from product-centric to customer-centric marketing by delivering personalized buyer experiences that align product, sales, and marketing. So that's a great example and a pretty good elevator pitch I think you would agree. Here's another independent agency, Signal Theory, based in Kansas City. These guys have a great track record, and they have a who and a what that are kind of said together. We transform brands in the food and animal health ecosystem. So that's pretty interesting. By delivering inspired marketing solutions that fuse behavioral science with data science. So not just a creative agency, but almost more of a consultancy that is going to look at behavioral science to help solve business problems for brands in the food and animal health ecosystem. That's pretty valuable if you're a client that plays in that space. And then Ray Ward, I had a screen grab up before. You can see what they say here on their website. See how we get welcomed, our clients welcomed into more homes. And so they've taken their elevator pitch and crafted it in kind of a user-friendly way, which is we deliver inspired marketing solutions for home and building brands that elevate style, reimagine function, and expand enjoyment. We're Ray Ward, and home is where we live. So you can guess what they do. And if you look inside the American home, almost anything that you can find inside the American home that has to do with its structure or its design, that's what they know, and that's what they do well, and they're awesome at it. They don't target everybody with everything. So if you can answer these questions, then we want to do for ourselves what we do for our clients. We want to develop a brief for our own brand, So in effect, a positioning brief for our own agency. And this is a definition of, what's the environment, the setting, what are the constraints we face, the challenges that we've got to overcome, what outcomes are we trying to produce with this strategy? What is the strategy? And that this is where we go ahead and articulate the who, the what, the way, and the why. What are the supporting ideas that are proofs of concept? How do we define our audience? So this is an audience persona, meeting target clients. And then what would be some interesting ways to bring this to life? What's the theme? What's an interesting way we could articulate this? So this is an incredibly important thing that we all need to do for our own brands, is have a positioning brief that can then inform everyone in the entire firm. This is what we're about. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. And it informs the website, your new business presentations, how you hire, how you train, how you develop your service offerings. Everything revolves around your questions to this brief. So I want to remind you to go ahead and please submit some questions, and you do that in writing, just using the interface there on the screen. And we're going to stop in a few minutes and take your questions. So please go ahead and start submitting anything that's on your mind, anything at all on your mind, because we'll have plenty of time to look at them. Let me share with you some tools and thought starters of how we do this, because as I've said many times, it's not easy. We want to start with a kind of divergent approach. So it's fine to get, people in a conference room and a whiteboard or a Zoom in today's environment, and just, put lots of things up, like just develop very long lists of your what and your who and your way and your why. That's fine, because we want to, in effect, get the parts on the table. We want to get what's possible out there, knowing that our next step then is to converge. We're then going to start scratching some things off. We're going to start making some choices and say, okay, well, we could do that, but we're not going to. Or, yeah, we do that, but we're not great at it. Yeah, we've worked in that category, but we don't really know our way around very well. So we're starting to make some choices. That's the place to start. It's important in this process to also stop and think about yes, you've got expertise in it, but you might not like it. You know what I'm talking about? Have you had this experience? Like, yeah, we're good at CRM and we can do it, but yeah, we don't really like it. That's pretty important to go ahead and rate on this chart. You can see 4 quadrants. A is we've got high interest in it, but we don't know it very well. So yeah, you might want to pursue it. B is, yeah, we love it and we're great at it. That is definitely where you want to put your stake in the ground. C is, yeah, we're not that interested and we're not that good at it, so you'd never do those things. And D, and then you'll have some things in your D quadrant. You've got high expertise, but you don't really like it. You're not that interested in it, so don't do it. Even if it makes good business sense, don't do it, because unless you're personally passionate about it, you won't succeed. So this is an interesting little thought experiment to do kind of halfway through your positioning process. Similarly, define what is really authentic versus really aspirational. In other words, authentic means, yeah, we've done enough of this that we can claim expertise. We feel a level of comfort, versus, yeah, that looks really interesting, but boy, it'd be challenging, it'd be difficult. We'd have to work pretty hard at it. I don't say that you don't want to have any aspirational aspects to your positioning strategy. I think you do. because people are motivated by it, but just don't make it so aspirational that people feel like it's, your team feels like it's just unrealistic. Like, yeah, that would be cool, but wow, that would be a really different agency. And I want to share also with you a useful tool that shows how a clear positioning strategy guides client selection. So if you've defined your what, why, who, you're going to have some prospects that are A prospects, meaning you can see the A there in the center. That prospective client aligns with your what, they're in your who, they like your why, and they relate to your way. Perfect fit. That's an A prospect. We want to actively seek those types of clients. Those are those are the golden clients. You're more likely to have B prospects, but we want B prospects. B prospects overlap on several of these, but not all of them. Like 3 of the 4, but not all 4. C prospects only want one of these 4 things. That we should rarely pursue them. And D prospects that don't meet any of these, we just simply ought to pass on. I mean, it's not going to build your business. So this is how your positioning strategy affects your prospecting strategy. How do you know you've got a good strategy? Here are 7 tests. First, by the way, you will have access to all these slides following the, probably tomorrow you'll get an email that will provide you with a link to the slides. So I hope a lot of you are taking notes because we learn better that way, but you will also have access to the slides. So 1, does it allow for clear identification of target prospects? That's the first litmus test. 2, does it help us conversely say no to the wrong prospects? 3, does it help us expand our geographical footprint? So this is interesting, right? If we're what I call a regional generalist, then we're just going to draw clients from our surrounding area, from our own city or our own region, because we do a little bit of everything. So we're the country doctor, we're the country lawyer. I don't think that's what most of us want. If you've got areas where you can claim best-in-class expertise, then suddenly you draw clients from thousands of miles away. Doesn't matter that you're in Tennessee, you can get a client in New York or California. 4, does it create strong barriers to entry, meaning would it be difficult for other agencies to duplicate and copy what we do? 5, does it result in fewer competitors? So if you've got a well-defined strategy, that means there are very few other agencies who do this versus, yeah, there are thousands of other agencies who do this. That's a sign that you don't have a good strategy. 6, does it allow us to charge higher fees? Because basically, when we have deep expertise, we can charge premium pricing because it's that economic principle of what's scarce is valuable. If it's hard to find, then then we're able to charge better, healthier fees. Does it make sales easier? In other words, does it make our business development cycle shorter and less expensive? Because we're playing to win. We're playing to our strengths. We win 3 or 4 out of 5 instead of 1 or 2 out of 5. What you're doing here is developing a T-shaped business model, meaning we've got going across the top of the T, we're able to deal effectively with complexities of the external market, but we can do that by minimizing the complexities of our internal business model. In other words, we're simplifying our business model. We're focusing on fewer things that we can do well. We've got a simpler internal, less complex business model that therefore allows us to more effectively deal with the complexities of our client and of our client's business. You see how that works? And then finally, here comes the hard part. We've got our strategy, we've got our positioning brief. Now we've got to bring it to life in all areas of our firm. And this means it needs to come to life in the services we offer, how we hire, train, and develop our staff, how we promote our brand online and in new business, the internal systems that we have, and even the way we stage our brand, meaning how we look and sound and feel as an agency. So we will leave it at that. This will conclude today's online workshop, and thank you very much for joining us.